And now, coming to you live from Times Square in New York, New York. That's right, folks. It's time for the exciting edition of the BounceX Think Tank. Yes, hi, hello, and welcome, everyone. As always, my name is Peter Star Northrop, your webinar producer and host here at BounceX, bringing you Using Email to Nurture Big Decisions, How Nimble Enterprises Can Win Through the Inbox. An awesome presentation co-branded by the brilliant minds over at BounceX and Message Gears. So just go ahead and just get a sort of landscape of the industry right now. So the current state of email nurturing. How are brands doing it well? How are brands doing it poorly? Roger Barnett, what is the current state of email nurturing?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's helpful, I think, to provide some context for our client base, which we're most familiar with. So we work with almost exclusively enterprises, folks who send 10 million emails a month or more, and and primarily B2C. So within that context, folks who have sent a lot of emails in the B2C space. To large email lists. It's still a challenge to achieve the goal of what we hear over and over again. They want every email to be personalized, and it's interesting that the largest brands still struggle with this. What I've found is that it's a lot harder. With the more data you have, the big data actually gets in the way. That a lot of more smaller businesses and mid-market companies are much more advanced with email personalization than some of the large enterprises. One of the things that gets in the way is that large B2C enterprises typically have invested in kind of local marketing databases for one source of the truth, and it's really difficult in real time to get some of that data into real-time triggered personalized emails. Not that they're not, it's not for lack of effort, and I think over the next year or two, you're going to see lots of progress in that area.
Sure, I just wanted to add on to that from a strategy perspective, especially coming from larger companies. You're totally right about that, a massive amount of data, and then not necessarily knowing how to utilize it in the best form or another. I think a couple of examples just from a nurturing perspective that I've seen within the time here is that the most effective strategies are basically from post-acquisition all the way to purchase, post-purchase, and through that entire flow. So I think we'll get more into that later, but I think there's a lot of value to be spoken about the entire user journey there.
Absolutely. And Roger, just a quick follow-up question to you, just from the audience itself. One of the poll questions I put out put a little concern in the audience. When we talk about nurturing, are we going to be discussing more acquisition nurturing, or are we going to be talking about how to boost LTV with email nurturing?
Well, I would say most of our clients are absolutely focused on loyalty and lifetime value. Generally speaking, our clients' email lists have been created from folks who have already bought something from them or come to their website and converted in some way, and their programs through our platform are meant to resell, upsell, and create long-term experiences. So I would say definitely in the long-term nurturing category, much more than the acquisition piece for our experience set.
Absolutely. I just want to make sure I lock that in. And Inga, just sort of to quash down a sort of flame war that's building in the comments over acquisition versus LTV sort of nurturing, do you, based on your experience in enterprise email campaigns, is there a benefit to one over the other? Should you focus more on LTV? Should you focus more on acquisition? What's the game there?
It's a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a depends one of those questions.
Of course.
But I think honestly, from an acquisition standpoint, the biggest piece, of course, you understand the value of an email address, and that's once you get that touch point, the immediate pieces of communication that you have with them after that acquisition is incredibly important. Of course, further on post-purchase, if they're a returning customer, getting them further down the funnel, depending on if you're talking B2B versus e-commerce, there's a varying tactics there, but I think ultimately it's, from all those touch points throughout.
Awesome. Now, just talking more about brands themselves and specific examples, I think we're going to focus more on that LTV sort of nurturing. What are brands? Inga, I'm going to ask you this first, since I've seen a lot of your work already. What have you seen in terms of brands sort of succeeding and failing when it comes to nurturing and boosting high LTV relationships across the email channel specifically?
Sure. So a couple of examples. I think from a nurturing standpoint, I think for what I see in B2B that works really well is content. So anything around like a webinar, for example, or white papers, any of that content, any of that, the nurturing content that is branded to your brand, but not necessarily super specific to your brand, is more content, a blog, something like that, that engages the user with you, but doesn't necessarily exist as a hard sell. In the e-commerce space, I think something that's good is like a quote unquote, we talk about this as like retargeting or recaps of the session. I think those are ultimately very successful depending on their intent level. And in terms of not successful, I would say there's a lot of product recommendation engines out there, like things that basically say, like, if you like these pants, you would like this top, type of thing. I would be wary of that depending on what you use, and I think there's lots of different ones out there. But from an email perspective, what I've seen work the best is really specific to that user and not trying to force an algorithm on them.
And then Roger Barnett, just shooting that back to you. I know we've talked about the, sort of the challenges with the amount of data that nurturing takes, but is there anything that brands are currently doing really well in terms of nurturing from your perspective?
Well, it's funny that Inga mentioned, kind of next best product. And we have some clients. I would say the ones that are most successful aren't in retail, though. We have some in travel and CPG client who uses some algorithmic work on a next best product basis, but it's really more around the most likely destination city they might be traveling to, or they more likely be interested in airline tickets versus rental cars. But the idea is to make it custom based on their history and their potential needs, enough to get them to click on the website and do a significant deep dive, once they get back to their back to the website. So we have seen some success there, and certainly our clients have. But the idea of our clients have, using our technology, which, because it sits right next to your marketing database, it's really easy to access all your data in real time. And our clients have done a really good job of creating very targeted lists of people they want to get in contact with. It's the kind of that extra layer of the right messaging. We integrate with vendors that optimize subject lines. We integrate with some of the real-time graphic rendering vendors like LiveClicker or Removable Ink. Of course, we have the multivariate testing to figure out what works best amongst all of those on our platform as well. And the message I would say is there's not one thing that works for everyone, but everyone finds something that works for them. We have some clients that love the real-time graphics rendering, to other clients in the same industry that say it doesn't work for them and they don't believe in it. But the message is get out there and try and test and have a platform that allows you to do that.
Right, and you've kind of alluded to this already, but I feel like you've already half answered this question. This is already sort of brewing in the comments section as well, with most of the audience being concerned with these industry-wide unsub rates on the rise. Do you think that email nurturing campaigns contribute to that or detract from it? And how can brands who are trying to do well with their email nurturing as they test and do that multivariate testing, how can they sort of ensure that they're not contributing to the sort of rise of unsubs as email volume increases?
It's a great question. I would say for our clients, the answer would sound kind of trite, but the better you are at personalizing the email and the more relevant it is, the less likely you'll have your clients or prospects unsub. And it's interesting, some some people don't like things that are so personalized because it freaks them out. Other people like things that are extremely tailored. All of these things are very measurable and testable, and so find out what works for your client base and for different subsets of your client base and optimize accordingly. But certainly tracking unsubs based on different email campaigns and different groups and audiences that you're sending emails to is critical to overall success.
Absolutely. So the main thing to keep in mind is if you're concerned about unsub rates, it's about managing the sort of massive amount of data that takes sort of building those good personalization campaigns. Correct?
Much better said than I did.
I, I just like to sum up as best I can. You said it pretty well. You said it with authority. I just said it like a weird Inga, from your perspective, with the nurturing campaigns that you've been putting out, sort of out in the trenches, is that the same thing you're seeing? And like, how do you sort of monitor to make sure that your nurturing campaigns aren't contributing to those unsub rates, or are they not, in fact?
Yeah, so I'm having a discussion right now about performance of nurturing and behavioral email versus a regular email cadence. And I think we have a good fodder for this discussion because I've seen actually an uplift with the regular newsletter cadence or
Mhm.
like the daily emails or whatever that frequency is, an uplift from both a traffic and revenue perspective with having launched the behavioral email. So in fact, it's I know we're talking more generally about unsubs, but I think just from a general performance standpoint,
Mhm.
you're enhancing the experience overall. And the thing is, if people are engaging with you from your nurturing emails, they're also going to engage with additional content as well. So I
That's
think,
that's awesome that
yeah,
you're talking about uplifts as opposed to sort of playing
Mhm.
against negatives. And we'll get into
exactly.
that. We'll get to that as we get into our first section, which is essentially we want to discuss setting the right timing up front. So when it comes to this, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding how to sort of send the right message to the right person at the right time. Because I feel like with these email campaigns, timing is everything. So how can brands sort of ensure that they're doing that timing right with that personalization and with all of that data? Roger, can you tackle this first?
Well, some of our brands, allow users to set that timing, and on an opt-out page, we'll say, you're currently set to receive one every day. Do you want to receive once a week or once a month? Or opt out of our deals emails and just receive our monthly newsletter. And that's proven to be effective, to give the consumer control, to make the experience more tailored to them. A lot of our clients are still on more, what's the right way to say this? They will run email campaigns around deals and specials as they, more from an inventory perspective on their side, whether it's on the retail side or on the travel side. It will be very offer driven. And you know what? If the offer is tailored and it's compelling, that has proven to be very effective. And then certainly setting up journeys for pushing people down the funnel towards larger purchases is very important, going from, discover to information to actually conversion. Those kind of journey building are important for a subset of our clients as well that are selling things that aren't an instant decision.
Absolutely. And Inga, you've kind of alluded to this already, but let's just go ahead and sort of start about how to set up the relationship up front. You're kind of a wizard at the welcome series, and that's the thing the audience is asking about sort of en masse already. Is your nurturing campaign, does that start during the welcome series? Like, how important is it in your welcome series in setting up the tone of future nurture campaigns, or setting up the cadence, or setting up the timing? Is it important for that, or should your welcome series be independent of your nurturing campaigns?
No, I like to think of it honestly as part of the entire cadence
Hmm.
because those are your first touch points after. So the thing is that a lot of times, depending on what the ask is for the email address, you want to have some sort of continuity between that first email or subsequent emails telling your story, giving them context, value propositions, all of the relevant information that says this is why you signed up with us and this is all that we have to offer. So within that welcome cadence, I think there's a great amount of importance of being able to establish yourself first,
Hmm.
and then with subsequent touch points that are more personalized, as we referenced earlier, you have less requirement from like a real estate and language standpoint to actually speak to those and just basically get to the real nitty gritty about their experience.
And Roger, on your end, like, have you seen any importance in sort of tone setting in the welcome series, or did you focus more on the nurturing series itself?
Well, they're certainly interrelated. You're starting a relationship with your client. A lot of our brands that we work with, they still think of transactional email as being here's your receipt or here's your flight confirmation, as two examples. and the marketing emails as being two separate endeavors. You know, one thing that's unique about our platform that our clients love is that they generally use us for both their transactional and their marketing emails, and so it enables the same group to manage that and to get a consistent experience. So certainly managing it out of the gate, making the customer feel welcome, and establishing a dialogue is the word we like to use a lot around here. Establishing a dialogue with your customer, you know, and giving them relevant information over time is very important. You know, I was just thinking about a conversation I had with somebody who runs an email marketing agency, and you know, he was explaining to me the challenges he has with you know, most of the enterprise email marketing software vendors with their journey builders, you know, and he's like, there's not a tool that exists when, you know, you can set up the most complex and sophisticated journeys in the world, but it's still extremely difficult to understand over 10 million customers. How many of them are going to get 5 emails a week, and how many of them are going to get 0 emails a week? You know, that kind of auditing in the tools are still not available. And you know, there's a ways of sophistication for, I think, the technology to be able to handle that easily and seamlessly, to make sure there's delivering the right amount of messages, and blending the kind of the manual journey setup with you know, more machine learning and artificial intelligence to make sure people are getting the right amount of emails based on their own personal behaviors. We're certainly making a lot of investments in that area ourselves.
Absolutely. And is there anything brands can do to start, from your perspective, to start that scaling process? Because that's the main line in questions as well. It's that I am really good at building these campaigns. When I scale them, they fall apart. Do you have any recommendations to sort of gradually scale email campaigns? Is there a way you can test your way to building these nurturing campaigns for your whole audience if it's 10 million deep? Or is it just a matter of just waiting for new technology to come out?
Well, it's certainly not a matter of just waiting for new tech. You know, one of the biggest areas that we see our clients and prospect is just the access to data and the access to tools to measure efficacy of campaigns. So, you know, if you have access to the entirety of your data that your business owns, and so and you have new data sources that are exciting that you want to target an email campaign against, and you can have access to those quickly, and you can deliver real-time triggers, and you have a software platform that can track and optimize, you know, in real time against performance on those, then you should absolutely get started. Absolutely start with testing. You know, put out a small group, try some different audiences, try different messages, do some multivariate testing. It shouldn't be too complex. You know, if there's too much noise, then it's hard to pick a winner. You want to have just a few options, basically, and then you know, once you figure out the best option, then tweak that option to see, you know, which is best, and just hone in. You know, the biggest thing I see is when people try to let perfect get in the way of good, and trying to achieve a perfectly targeted email across at scale across millions of users is a goal that is, you know, virtually unattainable. I think you could have very successful and reasonably targeted emails today, and that'll be easier to do in the future.
Awesome. And then bringing it back to you, Inga, just a quick question from the audience as well. So one thing I'm seeing a lot is cadence as well. So what is the best cadence for nurturing campaigns as you transition users from sort of very high intent, active, I just sent up your email address and I'm in love with you, to I need to get re-engaged? Like, how do you sort of manage A, that transition, and then B, what is that cadence? And C, if you can, are there any KPIs you can look at to sort of determine the intent of users via the email sort of experience and the data that you have? That's a huge question.
Yeah.
Feel free to chip away at it.
No, it's good. I just was organizing my thoughts for a second.
Sure.
So the way I like to think of cadence from an email perspective is the same way that you would think of the user journey on your site, from the, you know, basically the highest of explorations to actually converting, or the high intent piece. So from a cadence standpoint, I think the people who are in the middle of that journey, and I know we just talked about the acquisition standpoint and the welcome series and the value of that, but when people are in that mid-funnel kind of area where they're browsing products, they're reading content. I think your biggest opportunity from making sure to message the right kind of content, and we talked about this: right message, right person, right time. I think that's your biggest opportunity, just from a cadence standpoint, to make sure that you actually don't send too many emails.
Right.
And setting these what I call like cancel events or max activations for that actual that type of user, because you can over message them, and then the efficacy goes down as well.
Right.
Going back to unsub, and then for those high intent users, I mean, they're basically just need that final push to get them, to ultimately convert. So for that, I mean, I think also just being sensitive with that amount of messaging, and then the way that I like to look at the segmentation is really firstly for prospects, and then of course there's opportunity from those who are returning customers or existing customers, and treating them differently, of course, and both from a nurturing perspective and also just a messaging perspective, whether it be subject line, content, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. You kind of touched on a little bit something that folks are sort of jumping on in the comments a little bit. The idea of, you just talked about sort of intent level, and that's how you sort of segment. Is that sort of a road to personalization if you just focus on the kind of user instead of breaking up your users into types as opposed to richly personalizing? Is that a way to sort of gradually build up to the sort of enormous data management prospect that is highly personalized nurturing campaigns?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's, especially if you're implementing a new strategy, I think that's the best way to kind of go after your first way to tackle it, because that way you can at least go low, medium, high, and then you break it out into 3 groups, and then let's say prospects versus customers. That's not too insurmountable from a targeting perspective, and I think I've seen personally a lot of success in that, so it's highly recommended.
Awesome. And then once people sort of build up, Roger, and they get to the sort of mountaintop that is scaling their email strategy to that 10 million list and getting their whole list on these nurturing campaigns, are there any specific KPIs that you should keep in mind to make sure that you are still within the right timing front, like unknown KPIs that folks may not be aware of for these nurturing campaigns?
Unknown KPIs. I would.
Or undervalued, perhaps?
Yeah, undervalued. The majority of our clients, I will say, and it's not because of product limitation, it's just the way they work, are still valuing, they're still looking at opens and click rates.
Of course.
And some of them, as their primary metric, we try to push them to go further down the funnel to look at conversions and revenue off of those as well. In terms of kind of the undervalued ones, I would say that would vary, very much by industry. But ultimately for our types of clients, I would say, using email as a primary personalized communication and messaging vehicle to create the most lifetime value, which is getting people to buy more repurchase and buy more things and establish brand loyalty. That's the ultimate goal, and the ones that are able to tie those 2 things together quantitatively tend to be the most successful.
Absolutely. And audience, I know you're asking a lot about sort of the messaging that sort of boosts that sort of brand loyalty and helps build those high LTV relationships. And we're going to get to that later on in the presentation, but I want to make sure that we're still crafting the right sort of campaigns. So let's just go ahead. We've sort of talked about cadence setting and all of that. So let's see how we can't supplement cadence setting and discuss sort of behavioral cues that we can use to launch our email campaigns. So first sort of question, like if you're getting people who have already been identified via email coming back to site, Inga Kanther, I'm going to ask you this. Should you even be emailing them if they're already showing that high intent thing of coming back to your site, or is it still valuable to sort of look and see what they're doing based on the way you've identified them via the email address?
Yeah, for sure. So that goes back to that mid-funnel user journey. So people that are that have, of course, that we've identified, we know that they're showing intent, whether it's reading content, looking at products, depending on what vertical we're talking about. There's much value in sending them back to site from a cadence perspective. I like to take a multi-send approach from like a timing perspective. I know we didn't get into that yet.
Sure.
But there's from a general strategy that I like to send the first email after about 30 minutes or so. After that, activity is triggered, because usually by that time we would have been able to identify whether or not they've purchased within that journey. So that gives you a good time of a window without kind of hassling them again. And then subsequently, the days after, I think there's a lot of opportunity for the following days to actually say, follow up on that and change the subject lines, change the content, maybe provide an offer or some additional value props. But yeah, I think with that kind of cadence, those mid-funnel users, and knowing where they are and being able to identify them and send them in a timely manner, I think is a big part of that.
Oh, absolutely. So give me that timing idea first, Inga. So when people come back to your website and give you those behavioral cues, we'll discuss what those cues are in just a moment, but if they are giving you those moments of, hey, I should send you an email address, what is the timing? Is it the very second they do that action? Is it delayed? Like, how do you test that sort of like sending structure?
Sure. I mean, so something like a welcome series, that's an immediate trigger in my mind. But when you're talking about nurturing campaigns, I think that there's definitely an opportunity to space out those messages, because otherwise it becomes excessive, just like any other kind of retargeting outside of email.
You gotta walk the line between being a concierge and a stalker. Sort
of. Exactly.
Nice.
Yes.
I made a metaphor.
Yeah, I like that one. That's great. But yeah, so like I said, like the one thing I've seen work really well here is the 30 minutes after send, and then 24 hours after that, and then if you want another 24 hours for like a 3-prong series. But yeah, I think that kind of timing, from a nurturing perspective, for those mid-funnel people is my best recommendation.
Right. And Roger, do you have any sort of recommendations in terms of timing on your end as well? Like, what are the best ways to sort of time nurturing campaigns based on sort of behavioral cues that have come on site? Like your transactional messaging specifically.
Yeah, and I like the way Inga kind of categorized mid-funnel, and I would tend to agree with her, kind of a delay for people that aren't showing particular buying behavioral cues, and the intention of the email is to push them further down that funnel and get them to re-engage. I would say that there are times, and our clients have a lot of success with some use cases around sending emails immediately. And so some examples with that would be, I think the travel client, for example, that somebody just booked a flight, let's say, and the time that they want to send them an email is when they see them engaging actually with the confirmation email that was sent. They know that they're in their inbox, and they know they're engaging with their brand, or they're back on their website from a click from an email. They like to send that follow-up email about a rental car or about travel insurance or about whatever else that might be. Come to our website just to do research on your destination. They find great success in doing that in real time. And I'm thinking of another example about certainly any abandoned cart type things, whether that be in the e-commerce space or in the travel space. I think those emails getting back on a pretty immediate basis around, if you click here, you can get free shipping. Also, you can do that on your website as well when they try to leave the page. But those types of things get a lot higher engagements and conversion rates. If it's more immediate and bottom of the funnel and very targeted, the immediate sending makes more sense.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of triggering an email based on an email click, especially if it makes sense, if it's like a confirmational transactional email. It's so cool. That's a huge win for travel. Keep that in mind. Actually, a couple of travel folks have shown up post the poll we took, so that's really cool. Thanks so much for showing up, guys. Really appreciate it. Inga, so tell me more about what are some other on-site behavioral cues that sort of can tell you that it's time to sort of build this nurturing sort of thing, and how do I send this email behaviorally? You mentioned what that is. Like, what is the sort of send structure for behavioral email as opposed to straight up transactional or batch and blast style email?
Yeah, for sure. My first thought is something as simple as adding something to bag for e-commerce friends.
Right.
There's product views, particular page views. If you have particular goals that you have within your organization, let's say a particular amount of page views has someone who's ranked higher in their nurturing ranking for like higher to convert for like a longer tail B2B cycle.
Right. Like setting up stuff in your analytics to sort of show measurable engagement.
Yes.
Things.
Exactly. So those targets. Of course, it's a bit simpler when you have something structured like category, search, or product pages, but those are very typical for most websites.
Right. Can you take us through like the intent levels of those three kinds of pages just real quick? That just kind of immediately sparked a what are you talking about?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so of course somebody, I like to think, so someone who is well, the top of funnel are people that are like within the first or second page view, so they're like very, very high level.
And when you
So
say
they
high level, you mean like high level but low intent, like high in the
correct.
okay,
Yes,
yeah.
high in the funnel. And then when you get down to like on the category level, you've browsed, let's say, category pages and or maybe search for a particular query within the site. So you're looking for something specific, and then so that's the next rung down. And then when we get to the actual products, that brings you down into like the closest of to high intent, and then from a high intent perspective, I consider that anyone who has shown intent by like downloading content, adding to bag, something that's an actionable piece that they've taken a true click, not just viewed a bunch of pages in order to say, yes, I want this thing. And maybe they actually will purchase it. But the thing is that you have that email opportunity if they don't within that session.
Absolutely. So that's a way to sort of retarget them. Now, for both of y'all, I'm going to just quick refocus because I've been a little rude to some of the commenters, and forgive me, y'all. We've been focusing pretty heavy on the e-commerce side here, and our B2B fans are, hey, can you just adapt this real quick to sort of the B2B perspective? So when it comes to lead nurturing, like a high LTV customer for a B2B person is basically anybody who buys, right? Am I
Yes,
essentially,
yes.
yeah. So when you're trying to lead nurture to a final sale, like especially for a considered product, like what is the nurturing structure there? Especially when we're talking like a literal gigantic decision. Like, does the nurturing campaign take on something different? It says recording. Inga Conte, can you go ahead and answer that for us?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so the thing with, especially if you're talking B2B, that decision is much longer than something where we have when we're talking about e-commerce, of course.
Right.
So when you get to that piece where they've submitted a lead with lots of different information, they've already potentially interacted with a salesperson, they've downloaded content, they've interacted with webinars, like that kind of thing.
Like, in some ways, measurable engagement's almost easier for B2B.
Yeah, it is, because there are so many different touch points within that. It's just a matter, and I think that each within the B2B companies that I know kind of use their own scaling and ranking for what intent levels they see within, depending on what's the most important content. So I think it does depend on what's important to you. But I think in that measurable engagement, it's like the more touch points, the better.
Right.
In terms of lead ranking and saying like, okay, well, this person is like basically ready to buy. But the thing is that in most cases, like that is handled by the sales team. So really it's that measurable engagement. It's almost, we talk about like very engaged email content, but it's almost like that plain text personalized email that does have a lot of value for those users.
Absolutely. That sort of like personal touch to make it cool. And then Roger, anything on your end sort of adapting your strategy to sort of a more B2B side when it comes to those big purchases?
Sure, and I can speak from our own internal sales and marketing experience on this more than that of our clients. But where we found success is let me frame it differently. The biggest difference between B2C and B2C, which Inga touched on, which is just the volume of potential customers, is dramatically smaller in most cases, certainly in ours, and the sales cycle is dramatically longer in most cases. And so it creates an entirely different dynamic, where you actually can target by industry, and within industries there's subsegments that might get different kind of messaging. There are tools that let you understand different functions within businesses that might get different messaging as well. All of these things we touched on lead scoring, and pushing people down the funnel to a place that it can actually get taken over by a live salesperson who would try to bring it to close. The fundamentals are the same: delivering right message, right time. I think the tactics are very different. And, the technology is not dramatically different either in terms of building journeys and delivering the appropriate messaging based on needs. But tactically, how to get that, the skill sets are pretty divergent. And just where where you actually go down to the individual level to optimize would be appropriate, for instance, for my business, and it would never be appropriate to make a list of one to do a customized email, for a large B2C company.
Absolutely. So you'd have like multiple sort of relationship managers with your email campaign as opposed to like an overarching email team on more of an e-commerce site.
Right. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I can get behind that. All right, awesome, folks. So you've also been talking about wording, and we've just discussed sort of plain text emails and how they work really well for B2B. So let's go specifically into crafting the sort of perfect messages. We've talked about sort of how to set the tone in your welcome series, but within nurturing campaigns themselves, like what is the best sort of messaging when it comes to nurturing? How important is tone in your nurturing messages? I'm going to ask you this first, Inga Kanther.
Oh, this is my favorite one.
Why?
I like talking about copy. It's
fun.
Cool. Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways that you can kind of go with this, and I think depending on your brand, of course, like you know your brand best, there's from a subject line and messaging standpoint, there's a couple of different approaches. I think one is a sense of like urgency or scarcity, something that feels a bit more transactional, which is like we talked about these operational emails. It doesn't have to feel exactly like that, but it's reminiscent of that and also helps with from an open rate perspective. And I think I feel like those are the two main ones that I've tested that with the highest efficacy. There's also, depending on how familiar you are with this customer, if they're returning versus prospect, you can be more conversational as well. And I think that's a big part of that, knowing the right person and the right kind of message. And I think when you get to the actual email content, I mean, just from a best practice standpoint, depending on what you're populating, what kind of content you're including, whether it's product-based or not, you don't want to have too copy-heavy emails. The main story and impact that you're telling is basically within the header and the main content of the email, and the subject line leads you in. So ultimately, from a copy handle perspective, there's continuous journey from that open to actually, the subsequent click through that email.
Absolutely. So you would almost say that the more familiar you get with somebody, the less work you put into the emails themselves, like the actual looks of them. So go more and more plain text as you sort of get into those nurture campaigns, or am I wildly oversimplifying the strategies you implement?
No, I mean, you can still make them look very editorial.
Of course.
And also, there's a lot of potential for, you just don't have to necessarily tell the same brand story as you would from a welcome series. So if you're familiar with this customer, you don't have to tell them about you every single time and make that it's like doing handshake, 15 times in a row. It gets kind of excessive.
Right.
So you don't need to do that anymore. You're just getting across the relevant piece of content.
Absolutely. And Roger from Message Gears, when it comes to message crafting from your perspective, like what are the best ways to sort of build those nurturing messages? What messages are sort of the most effective? And are there any sort of different styles of messaging you can test to figure out what works best for your specific audience?
Yeah. Let me touch on something Inga said first, which I wholeheartedly agree with. Don't put too much copy in your emails. That's just a personal pet peeve. For the love of God, keep it short and simple. You talked about tone, and I agree that a conversational tone is always best if you can get there in your relationship with a customer. First and foremost is be true to your brand. If your brand is irreverent, the tone of your emails should be irreverent. If your brand is that of an investment bank, then the tone of your emails should be more formal. Be consistent along those lines. And then the third thing, of course, is just test. All of these things are measurable and testable. And if you feel the need, some of our clients, as I mentioned before, swear by third parties for optimizing some things. There's a couple pretty successful companies to optimize subject lines. One is Persado. Another one is a smaller group, a great bunch of guys out of London called Phrasey, that they work with a lot of clients in the U.S. with great success. There's some real-time content that can, which is a different way of content optimization to make your email more engaging, because it has real-time information, whether that's a countdown or give you the current weather or the current pricing and inventory of whether that be retail items or travel items. Not all of these things will work for everybody. You have to find the right mix that works for you. So get out there and try some things, test them out, and you'll find the right mix.
Absolutely. So let's keep going down that sort of the tonality sort of aspect. Inga Kanther, like as you build these nurturing campaigns and build the right kind of copy, are there any sort of testing campaigns you can do to sort of like feel out your audience, determine what works and what doesn't, and how do you sort of test the tone, the copy and design of your emails without worrying about burning down sort of high quality leads? Because this is the thing the audience seems to be the most terrified about. Like you're talking about people who we have worked so hard on. There's like at the bottom of the funnel. Now you want me to test now? You want me to test now? No, don't. Like, is there a safe way to test bottom of the funnel messaging? Or should you just keep going with what you got?
Um,
I'll go for it, Roger.
go for it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I would just say, and maybe as a foundational comment, if you send anything to your bottom of the funnel clients, by definition, you're testing. Even if it's the same thing you sent last week, you're still testing to see if you'll get the same results. Don't be scared about trying different things. Just don't send it to everybody. Just send it to small packets and learn. If you're not learning, then you're not optimizing by definition. But I apologize for jumping in.
Oh no, that's great. That was a really awesome insight. So I totally dig the jump in.
Yeah, and it was basically exactly what I was going to say.
Damn it,
No, the thing is that you're still testing, regardless. I mean, the thing is that your instincts are probably way better than you even give yourself credit for regarding your strategy. And I think, we talked about, if you have to do a holdout group, that's fine too. If you want to, do like a 50-50 split or something, if that makes you more comfortable with the test, for sure. But the thing is that you might actually learn something that you wouldn't have known otherwise. And I think, as a testament to what we've worked on here and a lot
Testament.
of the yes,
Nice. Sorry.
A lot of these high intent people are really worth messaging, and if you do it in the right way, you will see much efficacy there.
Love to use the word. I'll go for it, Roger.
And I'll just add one thing on top of that, which I completely agree with, is you should set the expectations with your manager around the fact that you will be testing. And, to say, if I don't do a campaign that might have slightly tick under conversion rates as the previous one, I'm not learning what works and what doesn't, And so if you set expectations, right now over time, your trend line needs to be going up, But if you set expectations where you're not living and dying by each and every campaign, that there's a positive when you get a slightly negative result because you learn what not to do, what to stay away from. Then, setting those expectations come up front, you can treat these key learnings as a win at how you present it. But, don't start that after the fact. Set those expectations up front.
Absolutely. Like everything is a test, and don't be afraid of it because, it's more valuable to get more folks in the future and to stop doing sort of negative things. All right, Inga, just actually for both of you, whoever wants to jump on this first is fine by me. Just getting into the blood and guts of email itself. So a bunch of specific questions about the very specific crafting of email addresses. When it comes to sending your emails, is embedding text in images themselves the best practice, or what do you recommend if not?
I can take this one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, I think it highly depends. So I'm going to probably get a bit technical here, but it does depend on how you're coding your
This is
emails.
a technical crowd. We're good.
Yeah.
We good.
No, it's good. So I've seen like when you're mapping images that have text within them, if you think of how that scales on different devices, that gets to be a bit tricky. But I think if you're writing this in true HTML and making them adaptive to a device, I'm all for it. I see like some really premium editorial looking nurturing emails actually.
Follow-up question, by the way,
Yes.
is there a difference between true HTML and false HTML?
No, it was just an emphasis.
Okay, just making sure. That was somewhat confusing to some members.
No, it's fine. It's fine. No, just saying best practice to code them properly as you would to make it adaptive by device instead of slicing a bunch of images and image mapping them.
Jace, what about your perspective, Roger? Like in that specific instance, is it better to sort of embed text in images, or what would work if not?
I don't have anything to add, and I really
Awesome.
liked her technical explanation of why sometimes images aren't practical, if for no other reason.
Absolutely. All right. So, audience, I've been loving this conversation a lot, and I know you have too, and I really appreciate all your awesome questions. We're going to get to them as best as possible within the 9 minutes we have left in this presentation. Oh, God. But as I've sort of alluded to, time is a thing, and we have to get back to our jobs and stuff. So I want to make sure this conversation continues in the exact way y'all want it to. So just real fast, ladies and gentlemen, just going to throw out one more poll question. Let me know, ladies and gentlemen, precisely how you want to continue this conversation. Would you like to hear more about a behavioral audit from BounceX to learn how to make your email program behavioral and sort of optimized for the actual behaviors you have on site and within your emails itself? Would you hear more about the game-changing insights over at MessageGears? Spoiler alert, you do. Oh my God, please check them out. They have so many amazing insights into sort of nurturing and keeping email working, especially if you keep your data on site as well as in the cloud. They have some very interesting solutions as well. Really love the sort of stuff they set up. Roger, again, thank you so much for being here and giving us your awesome perspective. And ladies and gentlemen, just let us know if you'd like to hear more about both of those things or neither. It's just really cool to make sure we're helping y'all precisely in the way that you want to. We want to make sure that everyone gets the follow-ups they so desire. So everyone, thank you so much for voting so quickly. I really appreciate most of us voting within 30 seconds. I'm going to go ahead, close that poll. No need to share results. Let's just keep going through sort of all of the questions. All right, so another technical one. This one I barely understand because I'm just a dude who yells on the internet all the time more than a marketer itself. What third-party server do you recommend for sending emails? Is that a ESP question or is that a technical question? If you want to handle that, Roger, go for it.
Third-party server, sure. I mean, yeah, I'll bust in. I mean, for sending emails, MessageGears, believes that, for our client set, the largest of enterprises, it is. We believe in a couple things. One is that you should be creating emails as close to your data as possible. Kind of replicating your data set and sending it to the cloud to create your emails with your duplicate set of data is expensive and laborious and has security concerns and issues. And so create your emails behind your firewall if you can. But sending through the cloud is the most cost efficient and effective. And there are some good vendors that do that. I would say SendGrid is one of the better known vendors. They kind of started out as a freemium model and have trying to go more upstream. SparkPost is another one, and certainly that's something that MessageGears does as well. We're a full stack solution from data to actually sending the email, but we also can just provide the enterprise cloud-based sending services as well. If that's what the question was speaking to, that's how I would answer it.
Absolutely. And okay, this question was asked and immediately set off a tiny firestorm, so I'm going to let you guys weigh in on it. So I'm just going to go ahead and ask this question the exact way it was asked. Who are some of the third-party email database vendors that you should consider when looking for new customer prospects beyond our internal databases? Which to me is a question simply asking, is there a good place to buy lists? And I feel like there's a very simple answer to that question, Inga Konther.
No.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. If you're looking for new ways to get more audiences, there are way better acquisition sources than just buying new email databases, which kind of brings us to the sort of follow-up question to that sort of came in, which might have more of a debate within it. Would you ever recommend cold emails ever? So there's been almost zero interaction with your brand. Like if you're in a B2B situation, you got this email from an event list. They came to your event. You have no idea if they interacted with you or not. You don't even know if they know you exist or not. But you just happen to have this email address. Is there any strategy that works for cold emails, or should you sort of avoid that perspective? I think Roger, you're ready to answer this one.
Yeah, I'd say from B2B, and I'd love to hear Inga's opinion on this. For B2B, there could be, if you have a monthly newsletter or specific research that's launched, if they're, in your database and they came from, a meeting at a trade show or a relevant company that you'd like to do business with at some point, or somebody in your organization like to do business, I don't think there's any harm in sending information, and they can always opt out. Now, anything that's kind of pushy and salesy, I would, that I would strongly advise against that.
Absolutely. And Inga, what about your perspective there? Because that question has just sort of blown up the comment section at this point.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
I'm in full agreement. I think, yeah, there's definitely potential, especially if, from a B2B side, your acquisition strategy is largely from these types of, trade shows and maybe these those acquisition sources, you know, you don't necessarily have a lost opportunity in trying, but of course, expect those metrics to be much lower than your benchmark.
Right. And since we've kind of sort of stumbled away from LTV and into acquisition, let's just go ahead and keep going down the line here. So are there any strategies that you'd use where email is the acquisition source? For instance, could you buy an ad space on a newsletter? So like if you're an e-commerce brand and you have a product that lines up with an awesome publisher, would you purchase an ad space within that and be like, yo, check out this awesome product that's within sort of this sort of well-related industry to us? Or is that still dangerous?
I mean, I've seen actually success in it sometimes. It does depend, and I think if it's like a partnership between brands and it's not necessarily true ad space, but something like a I'm trying to think of a specific example that isn't a dead giveaway, but something just something that's like based on, you know, likely brands that would work together or have similar strategies or that kind of thing. That there is potential in that if it's like cross-branded with something else. It doesn't feel as forced, but yeah, largely like ads and email. It's just the idea of ads is a bit jarring.
Of course. Yeah. Keep away from it.
Yes.
Acquire elsewhere, build your LTV within your email. Roger, you almost had some thoughts there, but then we rudely interrupted you.
No, you didn't rudely interrupt at all. That was brilliant. I would just add that in general, I'm, you know, for B2B, I'm very leery of kind of non-targeted, very targeted advertising, you know, as a way to attract and acquire, you know, leads. But yes, email, like I've seen other businesses and peers that I've talked to and some clients have success in a kind of an email sponsorship type thing. You know, I'm thinking, you know, in a prior industry I was in, you know, sponsoring the media post daily email that was very specific around practitioners of the software that was partnering with them to send that daily email out. You know, it could be successful. Yeah, the actual manifestation of that partnership was something that looked like a banner on top of the email, but you know, it was, you know, kind of a presented by type thing. But I would just be very very careful to Inga's point, but not that it couldn't work with the right relationship.
Right, be exceedingly selective with your partnerships, and perhaps even avoid it if you can't find anything perfect. That's one of the situations where perfect certainly supersedes good, correct?
Yes, I would agree with that.
To go against the previous point. Aha, found it. All right, folks, so that sort of brings us very close to the hour. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for all your perspectives here today. Inga Konther, thank you so much for your perspective and all sort of the awesome campaign in the trenches advice you gave us. Any final thoughts on sort of how to keep building LTV throughout the email relationships y'all build?
I think, yeah, just being mindful of the entire user journey, I think, is a big part of it. I think it's very easy to get more segmented in how you think about it, but being able to do that high 10,000-foot view, if I may say, that, you know, I think that there's a lot of perspective to be gained there.
Awesome. And then Roger Barnett, CEO of MessageGears. Again, thank you so much. Like, just revelatory sort of advice within those nurturing campaigns, sort of how to broadly scale these huge strategies. Any final thoughts from you before we go ahead and read the credits here?
No, just I've enjoyed today, and just test. This will be my advice.
That's the manifesto, guys. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Just so you know, this presentation was produced, hosted, and voiced by me, Peter Star Northrop. All the amazing content you heard today came equally from the brilliant minds over at MessageGears. Special thanks to Will Devlin at MessageGears, as well as the good team over at BounceX. Special thanks to Inga Konther. Just so you know, demand for this presentation was generated by Paul, #TheMachineLee. Our script supervisor is Millie Mehta, and our executive producer is Julia Spano. Thanks so much for your time, everyone, and as always, we'd like to leave you with peace, love, and behavioral intelligence. Everyone be well. Thank you so much.